Alright, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Rustomod. In the last episode, you saw us build a custom fuel cell for our 1950 Willys Wagon that we're actually putting on a new Jeep Wrangler chassis. Now, we're not just putting the body onto a new Jeep chassis, we're putting a Volkswagen TDI turbo diesel in this chassis as well. So, if you saw the last episode, we started fabricating an entire fuel cell for the Jeep, and we fabricated the entire exhaust system that we're going to use for the Jeep as well, and that all worked really nicely. Now the goal is we're trying to take this thing on Hot Rod Power Tour, so we have to get this thing ready to go in a few months here. So how we're doing this build is we're trying to do everything on the frame and get that completely done, and then do everything on the body and get that completely done, so that way when we bolt the two together, both of the pieces will be completely done, and all we'll have to do is hook up some wires, do the interior stuff, and it'll be ready to go. So that's the fastest, easiest way we figured to build this car, so that's what we're gonna do. So now that we got our chassis stuff done, we need to go ahead and prep the engine bay, because we want to start wiring up the entire engine bay, so that way we can start wiring and putting everything in there, and we can access everything a lot easier. So what we're going to do is start painting all this stuff. So I painted some brackets, and now I'm sanding down the entire engine bay to get it prepped and ready for paint. So we're just grinding everything down. Somebody has swapped a V8 in this before, and they had done a lot of body work on the engine bay. So now we're going to grind it all down and clean it up and get ready for paint. Now, if you saw in a previous episode, and I forgot to film it, but we actually cut out the inner fender tub on the passenger side on the Willys. We ended up welding just a piece of metal in there and forming it to fit the shape of the original fender. So we're getting everything masked and ready to go so we can get this thing painted. Now once we get everything painted, we can put in all of our lights that you saw in a previous episode, and our intercooler and radiator and all of the rest of the stuff that we're going to have to do. But we don't want to have to be leaning over the fenders to build this car, so we're going to do everything that we can do with the engine out of the car and up on the lift, so that way we can get in here to get all the little things wired up, and it'll be ready to go whenever we put the body back down. So now we're spraying the entire engine bay with some chassis paint, and I actually use this stuff on a lot. It's a high temp chassis paint, and it works really well in a lot of stuff that we normally use. We did our frame in the same paint, and we are doing our engine bay here in the exact same paint. So we're covering this thing up, and it's almost ready to go.
Looks a lot better than it did. It is not concourse ready by any means. They had painted over the whole thing with some sort of bed liner material. Stuff was very tough trying to get off, and almost impossible to get it all unless you did a complete strip, which we weren't going to do. But they had some Bondo worked in there where they had fixed some previous rust that they'd put new panels in. But all in all, much better than what it was. So as soon as we get a couple other items, we'll be ready to start populating the front end here.
Alright, we're back working on the Jeep, and today we're going to start working on the fuel system on the thing. We kind of had a big break on it. We have a lot of stuff going on. Our shop has other uses for it instead of us building these cars, so we're back on the Jeep, and we're going to start working on the fuel system and the brake line, so that way we can get the body onto the frame and bolt it down to the final time. So you saw us make our fuel cell here that we ended up welding together. So we have our sending unit here, and we're going to just run our fuel line down along our frame rail to our injection pump here, which you saw it running in a previous video. So what we're going to do basically is our injection pump has a return line on it here, and we were just feeding that back into itself, into the tank that we were bench running it on, and it worked pretty good. And instead of running a line all the way back to our tank, we decided to shortcut it a little bit and do it this way. So basically what we're going to do is from our fuel tank, we're going to run our line to a lift pump. So on a Passat or a Jetta, there's something that this motor comes with. These injection pumps don't have that much pressure to pull fuel from the tank all the way to the injection pump. So we're just going to run a little carburetor fuel pump there, just a little bit of pressure just to move some fluid up to the injection pump. Nothing crazy high pressure because the pump doesn't necessarily need it to run, just for priming reasons and stuff like that. It would be a lot easier to have it in there. So we're going to run our fitting from fuel tank, and then we're going to run that line to our barb fitting, and we're going to make it a T-fitting. So we're actually going to run the return line from the pump to the T-fitting in front of our fuel pump instead of running the line all the way back to the tank. We're going to shortcut it here, have the fuel come through here, and then help prime our little carburetor fuel pump. And then that's going to run up onto the firewall, and we're going to run this fuel filter, and then that's going to run back to our injection pump here. So I can probably only get a little bit done because the body's still off the Jeep, and I need to have the body back on it to run everything that's going to mount to the firewall. But I'm going to get as far as I can, so that way we have easy access to run these lines. I'm also going to try to do the brake lines and finish up some other stuff on the frame that we need to do, so that way we can bolt the body back down onto the frame, and hopefully that's the last time we can do it. Dial in all the firewall stuff, wiring, and all the other little odds and ends to get this thing on the road. I'm trying to make it to Hot Rod Power Tour, and it's a few months away, so hopefully we make it, and that's going to be the true test of this thing. So let's get started. Alright, just going to wrap some Teflon tape around our MPT fitting here, and then stick this guy into our sending unit on our gas tank here. Alright, so I'm going to try to run the fuel line as close to where it was on the factory as possible. So everything, I believe everything ran along this side. So I'm going to try to tuck it up because our body sits into this frame here, so you don't want to put it up here. I'm going to try to get it as low as here and utilize some of these factory clips like this, where it can just bolt, where you can just clip right into, and then we won't have to worry about it. Don't want it too tight. Also don't want it too loose hanging down or anything. So that way we can keep this nice and organized and tight, and that way it's not hanging down in the suspension, but it's also not pulling it real tight. Alright, so now we're just going to put these little clips to hold the fuel line to the rail like that, and it's kind of nice because they clip in on the top and the bottom, so you can run a return or something, but they clip in like that. And then we'll screw this to our frame rail here. So we have that running there. Alright, so I'm just going to add these clips all the way down the frame rail, so that way we can tidy up our fuel system. It is a little bit harder to drill through the frame rail because we added some plate on the inside of it to stiffen up where we had notched the C-section for the clearance on the Willys body, but we get through it. And just got to finish up notching and putting these clips in all the way up to the injection pump. Alright, so we got our fuel line run up to the front of our frame rail here, and now I'm just going to bolt the fuel pump to the frame rail just like we did the fuel line. So that'll go right here. Like that, and then we'll put our fuel line attached like this, and then we'll have to cut it and then put our return line in between here. Alright, so we got the fuel line ran around here, got these cool clips in using some factory mounts and stuff, and then ran it up to our fuel pump. So now I'm just going to route our return line down through here, trying to keep it out of the way of like the oil filter and stuff. we have a hole through our motor mount here, so I'm just gonna run it. Try to keep it away from the drive shaft and everything like that. Trying to make it so if we have a problem, we can access it from the bottom because we're not gonna be able to get it from the top. So gonna run it this way and then just plug it in right here, and then that should be good on that side of the fuel line. I'm gonna wait to do the rest of the fuel line so that way we can mount it to the firewall, and I can mount our fuel filter to the firewall and then run the side from the pump to the injection pump. But for right now, that's where we're at. All right, so I got my return line running here, running down through there and then to the T there. So then I'm just gonna run this once we get the body down. But that's our fuel system for now. So now we can move on to brake lines and everything else we need to do before we put the body down. All right, so now we're starting to work on the brake lines on the Jeep. So we have to run the back line from this back axle along the frame and then up to where our master cylinder is going to go roughly. And then we'll have to run the front brakes also. So we just have a coil of brake line, and then we flared the end of it with a fitting on it with our tool set. So now we can go ahead and try to install it. We just pulled the wheels off to see how the brakes look, and it looks like our rotor had been flat, drug down the road. You could see how flat spotted it is, so it looks like we're gonna need new rotors. That, I just noticed that whenever we were looking at it. Is that one like that?
No.
Huh. I wonder if the wheel fell off on that side.
Huh?
I wonder if the wheel fell off on that side.
Something happened.
That's weird.
And they drug it a long way for their.
Yeah.
There's a lot of metal off of there.
I know. Huh.
Unless it's a Chinese rotor that nobody noticed. But that's, or
Yeah.
they just took a freaking grinder to it. I don't know. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, don't even bother, because you're gonna have to replace that.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Huh. All right. Well, he ended up getting a replacement rotor for the one that was really ground down somehow. So I'm gonna yank this caliper off real quick, throw this one on, and we can continue moving on the brakes on this thing. So you can see the difference. This one's a little square compared to that one. I don't know what happened. I guess the wheel fell off of it. All right, let's throw this one back on. All right, got the new rotor on. So now we can start running the soft lines and the front brake lines. All right, so I got the new brake line here, and it already has a line on it here. So on these cars, there's just a bolt here that holds this on to the frame like this, and then this will go to the caliper. So I'm gonna flip this on real quick. Alright, so now I got both the soft lines on. So now there's a line that runs from this side, goes down the frame rail, and then up on this side where all the rest of the lines are to the master cylinder. So going to make that line now. So I'll show you guys how we're going to do that. So basically we have this brake line tool. It's a flaring tool. So we'll put our fitting on our line and we'll size it to the flare that we need. So it's a pretty cool tool. I think we got it at Harbor Freight. You just close it, then you pump the handle and it'll flare the end of the line, and then we can throw it on. So let's do that real quick. All right, and as easy as that, we have our new brake line flared. And that'll fit just like that. All right, so we got our brake line routed along the frame here. We're missing some clips, so we'll have to get these to clip it down. They look like this, but all the brake line will just clip into there, and then it'll run to the master cylinder. So now when we put the body down, we'll have everything to plug it right into the master cylinder on the Jeep body. So now that we got the brake lines and the fuel lines done, we are pretty much ready to go to get the body onto the frame for the final time. We got the exhaust done, we got the drive shafts in. So the next big thing we have to do is wire this thing up. So our thought process is we should wire the inside of the engine bay first before we put the body back onto it, because we can get to everything from underneath and it would just be a lot easier to access everything. So that's what we're going to start doing next. We're going to start filling out the engine bay with everything that we pulled out before we painted it, and we can get everything finalized in here, like our electric AC, our electric power steering, our booster, where we're going to mount batteries, everything like that. And we can get all that stuff mounted in here, and then we can wire everything together, and whenever we put the body down onto the frame, it will be ready to go. We just plug it in and that will be it. It'll all be wired up and ready to go. So we're going to do that. Be a lot easier than trying to lean over the fenders and try to wire it. So now we're going to start by putting everything that we have taken out from when we painted it back in here. So that way we can go ahead and start to wire this thing. Alright guys, and that's going to do it for this episode. We got the entire frame almost done to ready to go under the Jeep body. We just got to get the whole body side done. So you'll see that on the future episodes. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe so you can stay tuned for more content. And if you guys are going on Hot Rod Power Tour, drop a comment down below. We'd love to see you guys on the road.